Item 7. Legal relations and responsibilities. 1. Ethics. Honor the department's ethics policy. The department's ethics policy has been established in accordance with Title 43 of the Texas Administrative Code, Part 1, Chapter 10. A complete copy of the department's ethics policy can be found on the department's website. By entering into contract, the contractor certifies that the contractor has read and understands the department's ethics policy. Failure to honor this policy may result in action by the department, which includes but is not limited to verbal warning, removal of project personnel, termination of the contract, and sanctions under the Texas Administrative Code. 2. Safety. 2.1 Safety point of contact. Designate in writing a contractor safety point of contact, TxDOT. The department will assign a department employee for their point of contact designated as TxDOT. The TxDOT will ensure that the contractors and subcontractors' employees use the appropriate personal protection equipment, hard hats, safety vests, protective toe footwear, etc. The TxDOT will ensure that crew leaders and foremen, including subcontractors, have attended the required training. 2.2 Safety Pre-Construction Meeting. In cooperation with the engineer, schedule and attend a safety pre-construction meeting, may be a part of the pre-construction conference in Article 4.2, Pre-Construction Conference. Attendees for the safety pre-construction meeting will be the contractor, subcontractors, department, local law enforcement, and other personnel that play an active role on the project. 2.3 Safety Contingency. In order to improve the effectiveness of traffic handling and enhancing safety during the course of this project, a safety contingency fund may have been included in the project budget for traffic control plan adjustments and other safety-related improvements. Costs associated with the adjustments or improvements will be paid for in accordance with Article 9.7, Payment for Extra Work and Force Account Method. Article 9.7, Payment for Extra Work and Force Account Method is not intended to be used in lieu of bid items established by the contract. 2.4 Public Safety and Convenience. Ensure the safety and convenience of the public and property as provided in the contract and as directed. Keep existing roadways open to traffic or construct and maintain detours and temporary structures for safe public travel. Manage construction to minimize disruption to traffic. Maintain the roadway in a good and passable condition, including proper drainage, and provide for ingress and egress to adjacent property. Store all equipment not in use in a manner and at locations that will not interfere with the safe passage of traffic. If the engineer determines that any of the requirements of this article have not been met, the engineer may take corrective action. This will not change the legal responsibilities set forth in the contract. The cost to the department for this work will be deducted from any money due or to become due to the contractor. 2.5 Use of blue warning lights. Texas Transportation Code 547.105 authorizes the use of warning lights to promote safety and provides an effective means of gaining the traveling public's attention as they drive in areas where construction crews are present. In order to influence the public to move over when high-risk construction activities are taking place, minimize the utilization of blue warning lights. These lights must be used only while performing work on or near the travel lanes or shoulder where the traveling public encounters construction crews that are not protected by a standard work zone setup such as a lane closure, shoulder closure, or one-way traffic control. Refrain from leaving the warning lights engaged while traveling from one work location to another or while parked on the right-of-way away from the pavement or a work zone. 2.6 Barricades, signs, and traffic handling. Comply with the requirements of Item 502 barricades, signs, and traffic handling, and as directed. Provide traffic control devices that conform to the details shown on the plans, the TxDOT, and the department's compliant work zone traffic control device list, CWZTCDL, maintained by the Traffic Operations Division. In cases of disagreement between these documents, the CWXTDL governs over the plans, and the TxDOT governs over both the CWZ-TDL and the plans. When authorized or directed, provide additional signs or traffic control devices not required by the plans. If an unexpected situation arises that causes the contractor to believe that the traffic control should be changed, make all reasonable efforts to promptly contact the engineer. Take prudent actions until the engineer can be contacted. The engineer will make an inspection of the traffic control devices. Comply with the results of the inspection in the prescribed time frame. The work performed and materials furnished in accordance with this section and item 502 have no bearing on the prosecution of items 1 through 9, general requirements and covenants of the contract. This includes, but is not limited to installing, relocating, and removing project limit advance warning signs. 2.6.1 Contractor responsible person and alternate. Designate in writing, a contractor's responsible person, CRP, and an alternate to be the representative of the contractor who is responsible for taking or directing corrective measures regarding the traffic control. The CRP or alternate must be accessible by phone 24h per day and able to respond when notified. The CRP and alternate must comply with the requirements of Section 7.2.6.5, Training. 2.6.2 Flaggers. Designate in writing, a flagger instructor who will serve as a flagging supervisor and is responsible for training and assuring that all flaggers are qualified to perform flagging duties. Before beginning work, provide a list of flaggers certified to perform flagging duties. Provide flaggers as directed. Flaggers must be courteous and able to effectively communicate with the public. When directing traffic, flaggers must dress appropriately, wear high-visibility safety apparel, use flags, signs, stop-slow paddles, and other hand signaling devices, and follow the flagging procedures in the TxDOT. Comply with the requirements of Section 7.2.6.5, Training. 2.6.3 Law enforcement personnel. Provide uniformed law enforcement personnel with patrol vehicles as directed. Document the work zone traffic services provided in the manner prescribed by the department. Law enforcement personnel providing work zone traffic services must be trained for the service they perform. Comply with Section 7.2.6.5, Training. 2.6.4 Other work zone personnel. Workers involved with traffic control, including the maintenance of the traffic control, must comply with the requirements of Section 7.2.6.5, Training. 2.6.5 Training. Workers involved with the traffic control must be trained using department-approved training, except in the case of Section 7.2.6.4, other work zone personnel who may be trained using contractor-developed training in lieu of department-approved training. Provide a copy of the certification of completion to the engineer, except in the case of contractor-developed training. Ensure the certification of completion includes the following: name of provider and course title, name of participant, date of completion, and date of expiration. For contractor-developed training, maintain a log of attendees. Make the log available upon request. Ensure the log is legible and includes the following: print name and signature of participant, name and title of trainer, and date of training. 3 Laws to be observed. Comply with all federal, state, and local laws, ordinances, and regulations that affect the performance of the work. The contractor is not required to comply with city electrical ordinances not included in this contract. Indemnify and save harmless the state and its representatives against any claim arising from violation by the contractor of any law, ordinance, or regulation. This contract is between the department and the contractor only. No person or entity may claim third-party beneficiary status under this contract or any of its provisions, nor may any non-party sue for personal injuries or property damage under this contract. For permits, licenses, and taxes. Procure all permits and licenses, pay all charges, fees, and taxes, and give all notices necessary and incidental to the due and lawful prosecution of work, except for permits provided by the Department and as specified in Article 7.7, Preservation of Cultural and Natural Resources and the Environment. 5. Patented devices, material, and processes. Indemnify and save harmless the state from any claims for infringement from the contractor's use of any patented design, device, material, process, trademark, or copyright selected by the contractor and used in connection with the work. Indemnify and save harmless the state against any costs, expenses, or damages that it may be obliged to pay, by reason of this infringement, at any time during the prosecution or after the completion of the work. 6. Personal liability of public officials. Department employees are agents and representatives of the state and will incur no liability, personal or otherwise, in carrying out the provisions of the contract or in exercising any power or authority granted under the contract. 7. Preservation of cultural and natural resources and the environment. 7.1 Cultural resources. Cease all work immediately if a site, building, or location of historical, archaeological, educational, or scientific interest is discovered within the right-of-way. The site, building, or location will be investigated and evaluated by the department. 7.2 Texas Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, TxDOT, Permits and Storm Water Pollution Prevention Plans, SWP3. The department will file the Notice of Intent, NOI, and the Notice of Termination, NOT, for work shown on the plans in the right-of-way. Adhere to all requirements of the SWP3. 7.3 Work in waters of the United States. For work in the right-of-way, the department will obtain any required Section 404 permits from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers before work begins. Adhere to all agreements, mitigation plans, and standard best management practices required by the permit. When contractor-initiated changes in the construction method changes the impacts to waters of the U.S., obtain new or revised Section 404 permits. 7.4 Work in navigable waters of the United States. For work in the right-of-way, the department will obtain any required Section 9 permits from the U.S. Coast Guard before work begins. Adhere to the stipulations of the permits and associated best management practices. When contractor-initiated changes in the construction method changes the impacts to navigable waters of the U.S., obtain new or revised Section 9 permits. 7.5 Work over the recharge or contributing zone of protected aquifers. Make every reasonable effort to minimize the degradation of water quality resulting from impacts relating to work over the recharge or contributing zones of protected aquifers, as defined and delineated by the TCEQ. Use best management practices and perform work in accordance with contract requirements. 7.6 Project-specific locations. For all project-specific locations, PSLs, on or off the right-of-way, material sources, waste sites, parking areas, storage areas, field offices, staging areas, haul roads, etc., signing the contract certifies compliance with all applicable laws, rules, and regulations pertaining to the preservation of cultural resources, natural resources, and the environment as issued by the following or other agencies. Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Texas Department of Transportation. Texas Historical Commission. Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Texas Railroad Commission. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. U.S. Department of Energy. U.S. Department of Transportation. U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All subcontractors must also comply with applicable environmental laws, rules, regulations, and requirements in the contract. Maintain documentation of certification activities including environmental consultant reports, contractor documentation on certification decisions and contacts, and correspondence with the resource agencies. Provide documentation upon request. Obtain written approval from the engineer for all PSLs in the right-of-way not specifically addressed on the plans. Prepare an SWP3 for all contractor facilities, such as asphalt or concrete plants located within department right-of-way. Comply with all TCEQ permit requirements for portable facilities, such as concrete batch plants, rock crushers, asphalt plants, etc. Address all environmental issues, such as Section 404 permits, wetland delineation, endangered species consultation requirements, or archaeological and historic site impacts. Obtain all permits and clearances in advance. 7.7 Contractor responsibility. If the contractor initiates changes to the contract and the department approves the changes, the contractor is responsible for obtaining clearances and coordinating with the appropriate regulatory agencies. 8. Agricultural irrigation. Regulate the sequence of work and make provisions as necessary to provide for agricultural irrigation or drainage during the work. Meet with the service provider or landowner to determine the proper time and sequence when irrigation demands will permit shutting off water flows to perform work. Unless otherwise provided on the plans, the work performed under this article will not be measured or paid for directly but will be subsidiary to pertinent items. 9. Sanitary provisions. Provide and maintain adequate, neat, and sanitary toilet accommodations for employees, including state employees, in compliance with the requirements and regulations of the Texas Department of Health or other authorities having jurisdiction. 10. Abatement and mitigation of excessive or unnecessary noise. Minimize noise throughout all phases of the contract. Exercise particular and special efforts to avoid the creation of unnecessary noise impact on adjacent noise-sensitive receptors in the placement of non-mobile equipment such as air compressors, generators, pumps, etc. Place mobile and stationary equipment to cause the least disruption of normal adjacent activities. All equipment associated with the work must be equipped with components to suppress excessive noise, and these components must be maintained in their original operating condition considering normal depreciation. Noise attenuation devices installed by the manufacturer such as mufflers, engine covers, insulation, etc. must not be removed nor rendered ineffectual nor be permitted to remain off the equipment while the equipment is in use. 11. Using explosives. Do not endanger life or property. When required by the plans or requested, provide a written blasting plan. The department retains the right to reject the blasting plan. Store all explosives securely and clearly mark all storage places with danger, explosives. Store, handle, and use explosives and highly flammable material in compliance with federal, state, and local laws, ordinances, and regulations. Assume liability for property damage, injury, or death resulting from the use of explosives. Give at least a 48-hour advance notice to the appropriate railroad representative before doing any blasting work involving the use of electric blasting caps within 200 feet of any railroad track. 12. Responsibility for hazardous materials. Comply with the requirements of Article 6.10, Hazardous Materials. Indemnify and save harmless the state and its agents and employees from all suits, actions, or claims and from all liability and damages for any injury or damage to any person or property arising from the generation or disposition of hazardous materials introduced by the contractor on any work done by the contractor on state-owned or controlled sites. Indemnify and save harmless the state and its representatives from any liability or responsibility arising out of the contractor's generation or disposition of any hazardous materials obtained, processed, stored, shipped, etc., on sites not owned or controlled by the state. Reimburse the state for all payments, fees, or restitution the state is required to make as a result of the contractor's actions. 13. Restoring surfaces opened by permission. Do not authorize anyone to make an opening in the highway for utilities, drainage, or any other reason without written permission from the engineer. Repair all openings as directed. Payment for repair of surfaces opened by permission will be made in accordance with pertinent items or Article 4.4, changes in the work. Costs associated with openings made with contractor authorization but without department approval will not be paid. 14. Protecting adjacent property. Protect adjacent property from damage. If any damage results from an act or omission on the part of or on behalf of the contractor, take corrective action to restore the damaged property to a condition similar or equal to that existing before the damage was done. 15. Responsibility for damage claims. Indemnify and save harmless the state and its agents and employees from all suits, actions, or claims and from all liability and damages for any injury or damage to any person or property due to the contractor's negligence in the performance of the work and from any claims arising or amounts recovered under any laws, including workers' compensation and the Texas Tort Claims Act. Indemnify and save harmless the state and assume responsibility for all damages and injury to property of any character occurring during the prosecution of the work resulting from any act, omission, neglect, or misconduct on the contractor's part in the manner or method of executing the work, from failure to properly execute the work, or from defective work or material. Pipelines and other underground installations that may or may not be shown on the plans may be located within the right-of-way. Indemnify and save harmless the state from any suits or claims resulting from damage by the contractor's operations to any pipeline or underground installation. Make available the scheduled sequence of work to the respective utility owners so that they may coordinate and schedule adjustments of their utilities that conflict with the proposed work. If the contractor asserts any claim or brings any type of legal action, including an original action, third-party action, or cross-claim, against any member of the Commission or individual employee of the Department for any cause of action or claim for alleged negligence arising from the contract, the contractor will be ineligible to bid on any proposed contract with the Department during the pendency of the claim or legal action. 16. Hauling and loads on roadways and structures. Comply with federal and state laws concerning legal gross and axle weights. Except for the designated interstate system, vehicles with a valid yearly overweight tolerance permit may haul materials to the work locations at the permitted load. Provide copies of the yearly overweight tolerance permits to the engineer upon request. Construction equipment is not exempt from oversize or overweight permitting requirements on roadways open to the traveling public. Protect existing bridges and other structures that will remain in use by the traveling public during and after the completion of the contract. Construction traffic on roadways, bridges, and culverts within the limits of the work, including any structures under construction that will remain in service during and after completion of the contract, is subject to legal size and weight limitations. Additional temporary fill may be required by the engineer for hauling purposes for the protection of certain structures. This additional fill will not be paid for directly but will be subsidiary to pertinent items. Replace or restore to original condition any structure damaged by the contractor's operations. The engineer may allow equipment with oversize or non-divisible overweight loads to operate without a permit within the work locations on pavement structures not open to the traveling public. Submit contractor proposed changes to traffic control plans for approval, in accordance with item 502, barricades, signs, and traffic handling. The following sections further address overweight allowances. The department will make available to the contractor any available plans and material reports for existing structures. 16.1 Overweight construction traffic crossing structures. The engineer may allow crossing of a structure not open to the public within the work locations, when divisible or non-divisible loads exceed legal weight limitations, including limits for load-posted bridges. Obtain written permission to make these crossings. Submit for approval a structural analysis by a licensed professional engineer indicating that the excessive loads should be allowed. Provide a manufacturer's certificate of equipment weight that includes the weight distribution on the various axles and any additional parts such as counterweights, the configuration of the axles, or other information necessary for the analysis. Submit the structural analysis and supporting documentation sufficiently in advance of the move to allow for review by the engineer. Permission may be granted if the engineer finds that no damage or overstresses in excess of those normally allowed for occasional overweight loads will result to structures that will remain in use after contract completion. Provide temporary matting or other protective measures as directed. Schedule loads so that only one vehicle is on any span or continuous unit at any time. Use barricades, fences, or other positive methods to prevent other vehicular access to structures at any time the overweight load is on any span or continuous unit. 16.2 Construction equipment operating on structures. Cranes and other construction equipment used to perform construction operations that exceed legal weight limits may be allowed on structures. Before any operation that may require placement of equipment on a structure, submit for approval a detailed structural analysis prepared by a licensed professional engineer. Submit the structural analysis and supporting documentation sufficiently in advance of the use to allow for review by the engineer. Include all axle loads and configurations, spacing of tracks or wheels, tire loads, outrigger placements, center of gravity, equipment weight, and predicted loads on tires and outriggers for all planned movements, swings, or boom reaches. The analysis must demonstrate that no overstresses will occur in excess of those normally allowed for occasional overweight loads. 16.3 Loads on structures. Do not store or stockpile material on bridge structures without written permission. If required, submit a structural analysis and supporting documentation by a licensed professional engineer for review by the engineer. Permission may be granted if the engineer finds that no damage or overstresses in excess of those normally allowed for occasional overweight loads will result to structures that will remain in use after contract completion. Provide temporary matting or other protective measures as directed. 16.4 Hauling divisible overweight loads on pavement within the work locations. The engineer may allow divisible overweight loads on pavement structures within the work locations not open to the traveling public. Obtain written approval before hauling the overweight loads. Include calculations to demonstrate that there will be no damage or overstress to the pavement structure. 17 Contractor's responsibility for work. Until final acceptance of the contract, take every precaution against injury or damage to any part of the work by the action of the elements or by any other cause, whether arising from the execution or from the non-execution of the work. Protect all materials to be used in the work at all times, including periods of suspension. When any roadway or portion of the roadway is in suitable condition for travel, it may be open to traffic as directed. Opening of the roadway to traffic does not constitute final acceptance. Repair damage to all work until final acceptance. Repair damage to existing facilities in accordance with the contract or as directed by the engineer. Repair damage to existing facilities or work caused by contractor operations at the contractor's expense. Repair work for damage that was not due to the contractor's operations will not be paid for except as provided below. 17.1 Reimbursable repair. Except for damage to appurtenances listed in section 7.17.2.1, unreimbursed repair, the contractor will be reimbursed for repair of damage caused by motor vehicle, watercraft, aircraft, or railroad train incident, vandalism, or acts of God, such as earthquake, tidal wave, tornado, hurricane, or other cataclysmic phenomena of nature. 17.2 Appurtenances. 17.2.1 Unreimbursed repair. Except for destruction, not reusable, due to acts of God, reimbursement will not be made for repair of damage to the following temporary appurtenances, regardless of cause: signs, barricades, changeable message signs, and other work zone traffic control devices. Crash cushion attenuators and guardrail end treatments are reimbursed in accordance with section 7.17.2.2, reimbursed repair. Where the contractor retains replaced appurtenances after completion of the project, the department will limit the reimbursement to the cost that is above the salvage value at the end of the project. 17.2.2 Reimbursed repair. Reimbursement will be made for repair of damage due to the causes listed in section 7.17.1, reimbursable repair. 17.3 Roadways and structures. Until final acceptance, the contractor is responsible for all work constructed under the contract. The department will not reimburse the contractor for repair work to new construction, unless the failure or damage is due to one of the causes listed in Section 7.17.1, reimbursable repair. The department will be responsible for the cost for repair of damage to existing roadways and structures not caused by the contractor's operations. 17.4 Detours. The contractor will be responsible for the cost of maintenance of detours constructed under the contract, unless the failure or damage is due to one of the causes listed in Section 7.17.1, reimbursable repair. The engineer may consider failures beyond the contractor's control when determining reimbursement for repairs to detours constructed. The department will be responsible for the cost of maintenance of existing streets and roadways used for detours or handling traffic. 17.5 Relief from maintenance. The engineer may relieve the contractor from responsibility of maintenance as outlined in this section. This relief does not release the contractor from responsibility for defective materials or work or constitute final acceptance. 17.5.1 Isolated work locations. For isolated work locations, when all work is completed, including work for Article 5.11, final cleanup, the engineer may relieve the contractor from responsibility for maintenance. 17.5.2 Work except for vegetative establishment and test periods. When all work for all or isolated work locations has been completed, including work for Article 5.11, final cleanup, with the exception of vegetative establishment and maintenance periods and test and performance periods, the engineer may relieve the contractor from responsibility for maintenance of completed portions of work. 17.5.3 Work suspension. When all work is suspended for an extended period of time, the engineer may relieve the contractor from responsibility for maintenance of completed portions of work during the period of suspension. 17.5.4 When directed by the engineer. The engineer may relieve the contractor from the responsibility for maintenance when directed. 17.6 Basis of payment. When reimbursement for repair work is allowed and performed, payment will be made in accordance with pertinent items or Article 4.4, changes in the work. 18 Electrical requirements. 18.1 Definitions. 18.1.1 Electrical work. Electrical work is work performed for. Item 610, roadway illumination assemblies. Item 614, high mast illumination assemblies. Item 616, performance testing of lighting systems. Item 617, temporary roadway illumination. Item 618, conduit. Item 620, electrical conductors. Item 621, tray cable. Item 622, duct cable. Item 628, electrical services. Item 680, highway traffic signals. Item 681, temporary traffic signals. Item 684, traffic signal cables. Item 685, roadside flashing beacon assemblies. Other items that involve either the distribution of electrical power greater than 50 volts or the installation of conduit and duct banks. The installation of conduit and wiring associated with item 624, ground boxes, and item 656, foundations for traffic control devices, and the installation of the conduit system for communication and fiber optic cable. Electrical work does not include the installation of communications or fiber optic cable, or the connections for low voltage and inherently power limited circuits such as electronic or communications equipment. Assembly and placement of poles, structures, cabinets, enclosures, manholes, or other hardware will not be considered electrical work as long as no wiring connections, or conduit work is done at the time of assembly and placement. 18.1.2 Specialized electrical work. Specialized electrical work is work that includes the electrical service and feeders, subfeeders, branch circuits, controls, raceways, and enclosures for the following: Pump stations. Movable bridges. Ferry slips. Motor control centers. Facilities required under item 504, field office and laboratory. Rest area or other public buildings. Weigh-in-motion stations. Electrical services larger than 200 amps. Electrical services with main or branch circuit breaker sizes not shown in the contract, and any three-phase electrical power. 18.1.3 Certified person. A certified person is a person who has passed the test from the department's course TRF 450, TxDOT roadway illumination and electrical installations, or other courses as approved by the Traffic Operations Division. Submit a current and valid TRF certification upon request. Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service, TEEX, certifications for TxDOT electrical systems course will not be accepted. 18.1.4 Licensed electrician. A licensed electrician is a person with a current and valid unrestricted master electrical license, or unrestricted journeyman electrical license that is supervised or directed by an unrestricted master electrician. An unrestricted master electrician need not be on the work locations at all times electrical work is being done, but the unrestricted master electrician must approve work performed by the unrestricted journeyman. Licensed electrician requirements by city ordinances do not apply to on-state system work. The unrestricted journeyman and unrestricted master electrical licenses must be issued by the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation or by a city in Texas with a population of 50,000 or greater that issues licenses based on passing a written test and demonstrating experience. The engineer may accept other states' electrical licenses. Submit documentation of the requirements for obtaining that license. Acceptance of the license will be based on sufficient evidence that the license was issued based on passing a test based on the NEC similar to that used by Texas licensing officials, and sufficient electrical experience commensurate with general standards for an unrestricted master and unrestricted journeyman electrician in the state of Texas. 18.2 Work requirements. The qualifications required to perform electrical work and specialized electrical work are listed in Table 2. Table 2. Work requirements. Type of work and qualifications to perform work. Electrical work with plans requires licensed electrician, certified person, or workers directly supervised by a licensed electrician or certified person. Electrical work without plans requires licensed electrician or workers directly supervised by a licensed electrician. Specialized electrical work requires licensed electrician or workers directly supervised by a licensed electrician. Replace lamps, starting aids, and changing fixtures requires licensed electrician, certified person, or workers directly supervised by a licensed electrician or certified person. Conduit in precast section with approved working drawings requires inspection by licensed electrician or certified person. Conduit in cast-in-place section requires inspection by licensed electrician or certified person. All other electrical work, troubleshooting, repairs, component replacement, etc. requires licensed electrician or workers directly supervised by a licensed electrician. Directly supervised by a licensed electrician means that a licensed electrician is physically present during all electrical work. Directly supervised by a licensed electrician or certified person means that a licensed electrician or certified person is physically present during all electrical work. A non-certified person may install conduit in cast-in-place concrete sections if the work is verified by a certified person before concrete placement. When the plans specify IMSA certification, the requirements of Table 2 will still apply to the installation of the conduit, ground boxes, electrical services, pole grounding, and electrical conductors installed under Item 620, electrical conductors. 19 Payrolls. Ensure that employees, contract labor, and any subcontractors' employees are paid at least the predetermined wage rates shown on the contract. Payroll records must contain the information required by law. As an option, Form WH-347, payroll is provided by the U.S. Department of Labor. Maintain payroll and related records during the course of the contract and preserve these records for a period of 3 years following the completion of the contract or as required by law. 19.1 Minimum wage requirements for federally funded contracts. Comply with the requirements of FHWA 1273, required contract provisions federal aid construction contracts. Submit payroll records to the engineer in the manner prescribed by the department. 19.2 Minimum wage requirements for state-funded contracts. Comply with the requirements of 29 U.S.C. 206 unless otherwise shown in the contract. Upon request, submit payroll records to the engineer in the manner prescribed by the department.